I hope this is some light, frothy nonsense. Let's talk about Tenet. I finally got to see Tenet. At least I think I did. I definitely went to the cinema. I definitely bought a ticket and a trough of food. And a couple of hours later, I definitely left. These things I am certain about. What happened during those hours, I'm not entirely sure. Now, obviously, it's a Christopher Nolan film, so it goes without saying that it's a work of genius. And I'm clearly too dumb to appreciate it. Or is it? Or am I? So I thought I'd try and talk it out with you folks, and maybe come to a conclusion about a couple of things. 1, what the fuck happened? 2, was whatever the fuck happened any good? Firstly, to get this out of the way straight off the bat, it's time travel-y stuff, so it's complicated. I get that. But there's good timey-wimey stuff, and there's just shitey-whitey stuff. So let's go. The plot, and obviously, spoilers. We start with the protagonist. He's on a mission in Russia to rescue a VIP using an opera siege as cover. At one point he's attacked, but a mystery masked man saves him. A bullet seems to shoot out of the ground and into the guy attacking him. Weird. But the protagonist gets rumbled and captured by bad guys. He gets tortured for a bit, and then he manages to eat a suicide pill. But instead of dying, he wakes up, and a mystery man tells him the whole thing was a set-up to try and recruit him. Because he chose to kill himself rather than talk, he passed the test. Now, I'd be pissed off at being set up and horribly tortured as a test, but the protagonist reckons it's fine, because the fate of the whole world is in his hands now. So now he has to go on a mission to discover the plot of the movie. All he knows is the name of the movie, Tenet, and to give a wee hand signal. Somehow this is enough to propel the protagonist into the story. So he goes to see a scientist lady who will lay out the unusual premise of the movie. So this is that bit near the start of a high concept film which will explain how the premise works. Like Doc Brown explaining the DeLorean, flux capacitor, 88 miles per hour, etc. Or probably more apt, Leo explaining how Inception works in that other Christopher Nolan film. You know, the one where they use Inception to incept people. I think it was called The Dream Fuckers or something. Of course, in both of those examples, regardless of how wacky the premise was, the explanation did make sense. In Tenet, it's actually such a shit explanation that the scientist lady has to say, "Don't try to understand it." Now this kind of thing works in a comedy.
I suggest you don't worry about this sort of thing and just enjoy yourself. That goes for you all, too. Yes.
But in a work of genius action thriller, not so much. So allow your old buddy Bampot to try and explain the explanation. Everything in the world is moving forward through time, right? But stuff has been showing up that's moving backwards in time. So somebody in the future has figured out how to do this and is using these inverted things to fuck things up for us, the people in their past. So Scientist Lady has a bit of a wall that has bullets already in it. And if you point a gun at the wall and fire, it sucks the bullets out of the wall and into the gun. For this to work, at some point the gun must have fired the bullets into the wall. But did it have to be the protagonist that fired the bullets into the wall for it to work for him? Does that mean the protagonist fired these bullets into the wall in the future and sent it backwards to the past so he could then suck them out to help him understand the premise?
I don't know.
These backward moving things are apparently a very dangerous thing. Even though sucking bullets into a gun along a predetermined path seems a lot less hazardous than someone just shooting at you along any path they choose. So the protagonist has to find the guy producing this inverted stuff and stop him. He figures out where the metal in the bullets came from: India. He heads off to confront a rich billionaire guy. You know, as opposed to a poor billionaire guy, I don't know why I said that, and discovers that it's actually his missus that's in charge. Her husband is just a figurehead she needs because, patriarchy and all that stuff. She knows all about Tenet and gives the protagonist more info, some of which makes sense, such as the mysterious future people knowing anything that we will do if it's recorded in any way, like receipts, emails, computer records, things smeared on toilet walls and shite, etc. So everything they do has to be done in secret, and no one can be left around who might spill the beans. This is pretty much the only bit that made sense, and I thought it was very clever. It explains why all the info is relayed verbally, and it also pays off well at the end. On this mission, the protagonist needs some help, and he sent that Twilight guy, who he's never ever met before. Honestly, they don't know each other. Anyway, they uncover that Kenneth Branagh is behind it all. Not the actor, of course, he's apparently a lovely bloke, but the character he is playing, whose name I can't remember, even having seen the film twice. Is it Sartor? Sator? Sato? Anyway, he's a bit over the top, but not as bad as...
A party begins!
Branagh's made his fortune from finding stuff from the future that has helped him build his wealth, as long as he goes along with their plan. So he's getting stuff sent back to him for some nefarious reason. The protagonist approaches Kenneth's wife, no, not Emma Thompson or Helena Bonham Carter. God, he's had some nice wives, says old Kenneth Branagh, and 'cause she hates him and is terrified of him, she agrees. The protagonist and Twilight guy need to get their hands on the future stuff, so they organise a heist of the storage place at the airport where they think Kenny is stashing it. This is the best bit of the film for me, mainly because it's a traditional caper and it's done really well. During this exciting heist, the protagonist bumps into a guy in a gas mask who is moving backwards. They have a weird fight, the guy moves weirdly and then scoots away. So people can also be inverted and attack you, but they must have already attacked you and you're okay, so is there any jeopardy? Now you're reminded again about the weird premise, just as you were enjoying the fun heist. Bugger. So after that, the protagonist meets up with the Indian woman again, and she tells him that what he saw was someone coming through a turnstile. This is a device which inverts things. So Kenny has one of his own. They decide to steal some plutonium to offer Kenny as a chance to get closer to him and find out what he's up to. Again, the plutonium heist is pretty exciting. Christopher Nolan can really shoot a good action scene. They have a car chase to escape with the plutonium they've got, and along the way they see a car behaving weirdly, driving backwards, and another car having a reverse crash. Then Kenny shows up with his missus and threatens to kill her. So the protagonist throws him the briefcase with the thing in it. Or does he? Then he gets captured, and Kenny turns up in an adjacent room wearing a breathing mask. He shouts some stuff and the protagonist is confused, and then Kenny reverse shoots his wife and walks off. Then he appears in the same room as the protagonist and threatens to shoot his wife. Then he goes through a turnstile, which is a revolving door thing. If you're confused at this point, luckily someone else pops up to try and explain it all again. This time it's a bunch of soldiers, because Tenet have an army suddenly, who all muck about going backwards and forwards. Turns out it's all been very straightforward all this time. It's a temporal pincer movement, dumbass. Some people in the group go through an event backwards, while others do it forwards. The people who do it backwards can then tell the people who are about to do it forwards what happened, so they have advanced knowledge. And when they're going backwards, they need a mask to breathe, they heal if they've been wounded, and for some reason, a fire or explosion is cold instead of hot. Now if your brain's melting at this point, you get told again not to worry about it. So then the protagonist and Twilight guy take the injured wife backwards so she can heal over a few days. They also decide to go back to try and stop Kenny from helping himself out, but they fuck it up. So they decide to keep going backwards to the heist again, as they realise there was a turnstile there which can make them go forwards again. Of course, it turns out the guy in the mask that the protagonist fought earlier during the heist was himself all along, which is supposed to be a really cool reveal, but it just wasn't. So then the protagonist goes forward again, and Twilight Guy sees it's him, and they have a chat. Turns out Twilight Guy's actually an old friend of his. Also, the protagonist is actually the boss of Tenet, and they all work for him. So in the future, he must go back at some point and start the whole organisation off. And they're all trying to stop Kenny from activating a device called the algorithm that will make the whole world go backwards, which will fuck everything up for everyone, especially mothers who will have to have babies rammed up them at some point. Turns out the peeps from the future are having a bad time with the environment, and despite having discovered the technology to send things and people backwards, they can't fix the planet in the future. I reckon it's Greta Thunberg.
How dare you!
So they want Kenny to fuck it all up for everyone, and he's going to kill himself to trigger that off. The Tenet team figure out that he'll go back to a happy time in his recent past to top himself, and a sensor on his body will then set off the bomb-type device algorithm thing. So the men from Tenet send his now healed wife back to that point on their yacht to try and delay him killing himself until they can disarm the bomb. Then protagonist and Twilight Guy join the army guys on an assault on the base where the thing is. One group goes forwards and the other backwards. So we see a mixture of troops going forwards and troops going backwards, with weird things like backward explosions that rebuild the things they destroyed. But we don't see the explosions freezing stuff, so I think they ditched that idea. The wife has been nice to Kenny back on the yacht, but he realises that she's not the original wife from that timeline, but a backwards travelling one, the one he shot, and so she kills him. Luckily, the protagonist has managed to get the algorithm thing and deactivate it just in time. But on his mission, he saw the dead body of Twilight Guy, so he knows that now Twilight Guy has to go and do the mission the other way round, and he's going to get killed. But he can't tell him that, because he needs him to have done it for the mission to succeed. But Twilight Guy says they've got lots of adventures in the past that the protagonist hasn't experienced yet, so he'll be around again. Also, it turns out it was Twilight Guy that saved the protagonist right at the start during the opera siege. Remember that? Before we were all driven insane? So Twilight Guy has known who the protagonist was all along, but kept acting surprised by everything they discovered. Why? For the audience, I suppose. Then the protagonist meets the wife and tells her to phone him and leave a message if anything weird happens or she feels threatened. At the end of the film, she sees the Indian woman spying on her and calls the number, leaving the time and place. The Indian woman is in the car at this very moment with a hitman, waiting to kill the wife just to tie up loose ends. But the protagonist has got the message in the future at some point. He's gone backwards, and so he's now sitting in the back of the car, and he kills them both. Which is kind of cool, but it doesn't explain why a billionaire goes along on a murder mission with the hitman she hired, rather than just, sending him to do it, while she sits on the other side of the world, fighting the patriarchy. And that's it. That's the end. Or is it just the beginning? No, it's the end. Fucking hell, it's even mentally exhausting trying to give the main plot points of this film. So I've got a few things to say about Tenet. First, and least surprisingly, it's too fucking complicated. People say, well, you need to see it more than once to fully understand it, as if that's a good thing. There's only two reasons to see a movie twice. One, it's really good, or two, you eat so much cinema grub, you get wedged in your seat and you can't leave. Or maybe you want to make a YouTube video about it. So I did see it twice. Once at the cinema, and once by, well... And it's still too complex. And the thing is, I just don't see the point in the whole going backwards thing. Just have them be able to time travel. Okay, you don't get the weird looking visuals of things and people moving backwards, but then you don't have the headache of trying to explain how that would work. And every time I did see birds flying backwards or smoke billowing backwards, it just looked like what it was, film being played backwards. It reminded me I was watching a movie, and it took me out of the experience. And why can't they breathe going backwards? Surely instead of breathing in then out, they'd be breathing out then in. Why does fire freeze things? Why does one of the explosions during the final battle suck people into a destroyed building and then seal it up? You might say, well, Bampot, you just don't get it. I'm sorry, but I blame that on the film. Apparently, it took Christopher Nolan over 10 years to get the script to this stage. That in itself should have been a warning sign to him. Let me sum up the film in one paragraph. A guy is recruited into the shadowy Tenet organisation, which is fighting against people from the future who want to destroy the past. They have time travel technology, but so do the bad guys. Turns out the guy they recruit actually goes back in time at some point and is the founder of the organisation. Oh, and they stop the villain. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Why complicate it more than that? I think that Christopher Nolan at this point is given free rein to do whatever he wants, and he clearly doesn't have anyone around him to advise him. Secondly, I have to say about this film, it looks great. Christopher Nolan sure can shoot a great movie. The footage doesn't do it justice here. In the cinema, it looked amazing. The heist especially was fantastic. So is it yet another example of a director thinking, that will look cool, in terms of the backwards shit, and then trying to form a story around that? Bullets being sucked into guns, cars driving backwards and uncrashing, people fighting themselves. How can we make a movie out of that? With the world being the way it is just now, the film's poor performance could be explained on the coof. Personally, I think it's just too much of a mindfuck, and people's minds are already pretty fucked these days. I just keep coming back to the same question. If Christopher Nolan wanted to do a weird version of James Bond, why not just have the Tenet organisation have a time travel device? He can do a mission, and if it goes bad, he hits a button and he goes back to the start of it. He then has to help himself do it right without letting his original self know that it's him. Or something like that. The baddies also have time travel, and knowledge of past events is there from the future. Maybe Christopher Nolan thought that was too much like The Spy Who Shagged Me. To be honest, I'd sooner watch The Spy Who Shagged Me again than this. So my final rating is that Tenet sits somewhere in between the two piles of The Dark Knight Rises and that spacey one, no, not him, and not alongside Inception and The Dark Knight. Of course, what do I know? I'm just a Bampot. What did you think? If you liked this video or hated it, leave a comment, share, subscribe, ring the bell, bite the mountain, whatever you want. See you later.